So Dilip Rajan, I lead our solution architecture team that works closely with SaaS and AWS. So we have a great job. On the day-to-day job is to work with our partners and build the best architecture possible. During nighttime, we moonlight as babysitters managing our children. So it's a fun job to be managing AWS and SaaS at the same time with our families. All right, so I am not smart enough to do justice to this topic, so I want to introduce Doug. Doug is the smartest cookie in my team, and he manages all of our agentic frameworks. So Doug, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Dilip. Yeah, hi guys. I'm Doug Mbaya. I work with Dilip, and I'm a solutions architect. And so really my role is to look at our partner solutions and then AWS services, and then work on integrating both of them. The goal is to scale and provide a great experience to our customers.
One of the things that we really enjoy about our role is that not just in SaaS or SaaSWire or SaaSGrid, we've kind of spent quite a bit of our time scaling workloads to run on the cloud. So you may see a lot of architecture and blogs and white papers that come out of myself and my team. But today we said we'll take a different twist. We'll talk about agentic AI. We'll provide you our point of view from AWS's perspective of what is really happening in the industry and how do we think about building agents at scale. So security is very important for us, but really, before we take a step into looking at how agentic AI came into being, we want to take a step back and talk about generative AI itself. If you look at generative AI and following a set of rules to come up with a next text based on context, that's what LLMs are, and that's how it started. But as generative AI evolved, it became more from a rules-based system to autonomous systems. So that's what we're seeing with our customers, that agentic AI systems are adopting a mind of their own, and new patterns are emerging, and new problem statements are also happening at the same time. So that's what Doug is going to go into in detail a bit later on. But I just wanted to give you a frame of reference of where we have come in the last couple of years. And to be honest, it's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? It's back in October 2022, we had the first iterations of ChatGPT come out, and now we're talking about automated systems through agentic AI. It's like a completely paradigm world. In fact, if you asked me last year if agentic AI systems would take off, I wouldn't even know what an agentic AI system is. So it's kind of like a sea change in how agentic AI adoption is taking place. I want to just share a couple of slides that are talking about some of the trends in the market. And so we do believe, and we've seen quite a bit of the surveys that are taking place with a lot of customers, that 33% of the enterprise software applications will have some sort of agentic AI capability by 2028, which was less than 1% in 2024. So that's kind of like the sea change that is taking place. But if you ask me today, I think this number is close to 65%. Because just in the last couple of months, the amount of automation and evolution that has taken place with all the model providers, including what has happened with AWS and with Microsoft and with Google, that's taken a sea change in how agentic AI adoptions are taking place. I also want to point out that 15% of all decisions that knowledge workers take, whether it is today or tomorrow, is also going to be pretty much automated, but only to about 20%. Why? 15 to 20%. Why? Because trust in the system has to develop. And that is taking some time and effort and energy. And this will probably take a little bit more maturity and point of view thinking or change management for people and processes. So that's how we think about the evolution of the agentic AI systems down from Gen AI large language models, which came out a few years ago, and now it's really taken off. So with that, I want to hand it over to Doug to talk about some of the use cases that might come up in the industry. But across the board, whether you're talking about automotive or life sciences, or you're talking about media entertainment, or you're talking about financial services, one of the most interesting patterns that we have seen across all of the use cases is that financial services, which we thought would be the slowest to adopt agentic AI, is apparently becoming the fastest to adopt agentic AI. And that has been a mind-blowing experience for us to go through, where the industries we thought will take the most time and effort are the ones that are actually trying to solve the problems the fastest, particularly around regulation and particularly around compliance. So if you go to any of these industries and you have a problem with regulation and compliance, that's where they're trying to deploy the agentic AI experience. Because let's face it, regulation and compliance to regulation is important. But at the end of the day, we all want to feel valuable in the work that we do. So automating away compliance processes and intuition is something that we really want to work with agentic AI. That's how we are seeing the trends in the market. So before I go to the next slide, Doug will take you through the process of building some agents, whether it is a single agent or a multi-agent framework. What at AWS we have realized is that we're not going to help you build an agent just from an application perspective, from a user perspective. We're going to create the building blocks for you, and those building blocks will allow you to have not just a few agents, but thousands, maybe even millions of agents possible. We've thought about that from a scale perspective, and that's really what Doug is going to talk to you about in the next few slides. Over to you, Doug.
Thank you, Dilip. Yes, so the next stage really is understanding what AWS has to offer as far as generative AI, and then how we help you scale your generative AI application, actually go from prototype to production very quickly. And so right now we're describing the portfolio, what we have on AWS as far as generative AI is concerned. And so I'm just going to go through it very quickly. The very top layer is ready-to-use generative AI application. So those are agents or applications that have already been operationalized. You just bring in your data, and then you're good to go. Nothing else. You just plug your data, and then you start using generative AI. So that's our top layer. And then the second layer, which is the middle layer, which is what we are going to focus on today, is a layer where you gain a little bit more control on building your own application, agentic application, essentially. So you gain control on deploying your agents, selecting the model that you want to use, and then plug it in tools that you have within your enterprise or external tools. And then once you go down to the bottom layer, this is the infrastructure layer where you go there if you think you can do it better than anyone else. And so we give you all the hardware and the software necessary to build your own customization. So in that layer, you can have fine-tuning an LLM, for example, as an example of how closer to the infrastructure you have to making the changes that you need for your business. So in my previous slide, Agent Core was in the middle right there. And so let's dive deep into what is Agent Core. So Agent Core, Amazon Bedrock Agent Core is really an application or a platform that allows you to deploy and operationalize generative AI at scale and enterprise grade. So it provides the building block, as Dilip just mentioned, to allow you to remove the barriers or the heavy lifting of running infrastructure just then to power your agentic system. And so what we want to do is just like do the heavy lifting for you, and you just come and start running your agentic, developing and then running your agentic system. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that we baked in all the best practices that we've learned over time from our customers in terms of scale, performance, security, governance. And so we build the building block to allow you to bring your own enterprise existing governance into the application and the platform so that your agentic system is right away compliant with your policy from the get-go. So, and so altogether, what is really the goal is you have a POC, you develop your agent, you have an idea even, and then you want to accelerate the time where you finish with your idea to when it's in production and your either internal or external users are using it. And so this is why we want to discuss it a bit more detail. So what Agent Core does is it accelerates the development from prototype to production. Essentially, we give you the framework where you can take the same prototype code and deploy it to production right away with all the baked-in security features, scaling, monitoring, etc. And so we also give you the flexibility. We're not locking you into one specific agentic framework or language. You can use any language that you want and any agentic framework that you want, like LangChain, Strands, or anything. And so we give you the control and the flexibility there. And then all the best practices that we've learned over time, we baked it into it so that when you deploy your application, you are sure that you are applying all the best practices that your company requires. And so just in general, this is the overview of the architecture. And you can see that the different components that makes up Agent Core are meant to help you operationalize your agentic system quickly. And so some of the bigger component there, you have the runtime. Sorry for the caricature tune on the E there. And then you have the memory, identity policy, etc. Let's just talk about runtime and memory. What's the runtime? That's where you run your application. This is where your agent and tools run. And so this is really a pre-built platform for you where you only bring your code, your agentic code, and then it runs within there with all the best practices that we have. And then we have a memory. Why do we need memory in agentic system? It's because LLM in general are stateless, inputs and outputs, and then it forgets about you. It does not know about you. You ask a question, it answers, and that's it. When you bring in memory, that's where you start bringing in context. When you have a conversation, it remembers the previous conversation. It knows a little bit about you. And so when you start asking questions, it tailors it to your experience. And so it's baked into Agent Core. All you have to do is bring your agentic code and then say, okay, use the memory, and then it starts working. And then additionally, you have Gateway, for example. This is also my favorite tool because when you have an agentic, the power really of agentic system is the tooling that you give it to. Some toolings are there to access databases, unstructured documents, or even go search the web. And so Gateway is that way for us to register tools so that you don't have to hard code your tools into your agent code. So once you register a tool, your agent, the next time your agent runs, it knows that, oh, there is a new tool here. I can use it if the task at hand requires it. And then if you deploy a new agent, it discovers all the tools it has available directly without you having to go hard code the tool there. And then you also saw observability and evaluation. So all those are the best practices. And don't forget security because it has an identity baked in where you bring in your identity system and you just plug it in. That way, every user that uses your agentic system has a resource-based access that's already defined within your organization. So essentially, as I said earlier, you deploy and then operate and then repeat the cycle. And then you start focusing more on adding value as opposed to managing infrastructure. And so all these other components helps you in that journey of quickly productizing your agentic system and not having to worry about the underlying infrastructure. And so that's how we help you accelerate from prototype to production. And so we simplify the platform for you. We allow you to discover tooling and agents even, because remember, you can have a primary agent with sub-agents, and then the primary agent talks to multiple agents. And all of that is discovered for you. So that's how we help you accelerate your agentic journey, essentially. So let's briefly review what is the gateway. So MCP, I think most of you here know what MCP is. If you don't, MCP is a model context protocol, and it's just a protocol that allows LLM agents to access tools or additional data, etc. So in a nutshell. And so Agent Gateway supports more than just MCP. You can have API endpoints, you can have Lambda functions, etc. But this is just to extend the capabilities of your agentic framework. And then the runtime is where your application is running, where your agent is running. And so we build it for you so that you don't have to worry how to deploy them, scale them up and down with the workload. No, it's all automatic for you. If you have a surge of 1,000 users wanting to use your agentic system, it scales it automatically for you up and then down. And so you benefit from the elasticity that comes with the cloud. And identity just allows you to plug in your identity system. It supports Oath, but it also supports other identity systems. And so this is really important because security becomes one of the biggest barrier in adopting and productizing agentic system. And so when we add identity, we allow you to just extend your existing organization identity system to your agentic system so that users have the same policies and access that they usually traditionally have. And so again, this is the same architecture of the entire Bedrock system. So we have tooling, agent-to-agent, MCP. We allow you to choose your own framework, and we manage the infrastructure for you so that you focus on adding value. And we are there to provide you with additional access, such as knowledge base, for example. And remember, within AWS, you are not locked to a single model. We provide you a set of models to choose from based on the task that you have at hand. And a single agentic system can talk to multiple models depending on the complexity of the task. So that's good because it then becomes optimized in terms of latency, but also in terms of cost. And so these are some of the partners and customers who have used Agents Core to deploy an agentic system on the marketplace. And the AWS marketplace is where you can go sell your software. If you believe that you have an expertise in agentic AI, and then you can help other organizations scale with it, you can sell your agentic platform on an AWS marketplace. But before I move forward, I want to pause there and then ask Dilip, because you see a lot of those agentic use cases and implementation. What patterns do you see emerging recently as far as implementing agentic within enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting though. If you think about a single agent that can solve all your problems, it doesn't solve your problems, right? So you have to have multiple agents, but you have to control agent behavior. And controlling agent behavior is done through traditional supervisors, not my boss, but some kind of supervisor. And supervisors provide expertise in identifying agents to do a particular task. So if you're thinking about drug discovery, what you'd like to do is you'd like to have an agent for evaluating structured data. You'd like to have an agent for evaluating unstructured, agent for evaluating clinical trial and quality data, data modeling information. All of these agents put together, orchestrated by a supervisor, is a pattern that we have seen with a very famous big pharma company. And they were able to deploy this system very quickly and have it scale to 1,000 users in a matter of 6 months, like a full-fledged agentic system. So that was a really good experience of seeing some of these customers implement agentic systems before even having the tools. But now if you think about having these tools, then the 6-month deployment time becomes a few weeks. So that's really the benefit and the power of having all these tooling taken care of you, particularly security, as Duke mentioned before.
Yeah, thank you. And so what Dilip is really saying is that you don't have to reinvent the wheels. As you're building your agentic system, there may be other agentic systems or tools that exist that solve the problem that you have. And so the pattern that emerges is connecting your agentic system to other systems to augment its capability. And I'll show you how we do it with SaaS today. In this diagram, you can see the left part is everything that we just talked about regarding AWS and Agent Core. And the right part is a SaaS-managed agentic system. And what we do is we're extending our agent to talk to another agent who's specialized in something else. And then we bring everything together into one single agentic experience. While this is showing a one-to-one integration between two agentic systems, as Dilip mentioned, what we're seeing is a one-to-many extension of them. And so you see your primary agentic system can now plug into other tools, but also agents to be able to bring together a centralized knowledge and operation of your business, essentially. So specifically in this case, we're using SaaS Retrieval Manager to be able to serve as a specialized agent. The use case we have here is a drug trial, essentially. So SaaS manages both the structured and unstructured data that comes with a program for running a drug trial in the market. But then once you have that, you need to correlate it with your business. For example, what demographic is this drug targeting? What is the demographic that has shown response to this drug? And then where should we locate our distribution and manufacturing? What are our customer base? Who should we target? So that's when you start merging your enterprise data with specialized data within your organization or outside to bring them together to build a comprehensive report so that when you are discussing it with stakeholders internally, you say, okay, we know that this demographic is responding very well to our product, but is there a market for it? Let's look at what the market is telling us. Is it a subset of people or is it a greater population? What is the commercial viability of this drug? So you start putting together pieces that traditionally required a lot of complexity to merge, but that becomes just an interaction with your agent and a report generation by an agent system. And so this is how, for example, SAS and AWS together build an agentic system that allows you to scale, quickly go to production, but also quickly bring in specialized knowledge that you would otherwise have to go have meetings, talk to multiple stakeholders from different business units just to put something together at the end of the day or the week. Yeah, so that's in general what we wanted to share with you. And then if you have any question, we're happy to take.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dilip. Thank you, Doug. Are there any questions from our audience? Yes.
Hey, hi, this is Praveen here. So we are fairly new in this, and just wanted to understand that whether SaaS Bedrock agent or the whole Bedrock solution, is it available as a multi-tenant option? Because in organization, you don't want your HR data crossing with the other business data and all those things, right? So we need those isolations, but as such, the solution should be unique. Like, I mean, we should not have multiple instances of Bedrock. So what is the best solution for that?
Yeah, I can take that. So remember, models are stateless. You ask it a question, you interact with it, we give it data. Mm-hmm. So the way we separate concerns within AWS, the first layer is a VPC, Virtual Private Network, where that's where we separate, and our customers are using that best practices. HR will reside in one VPC, and then business in another VPC. And then if you are a global company, another division may reside in a different region or country. So that's one. Now, how do we make them talk to each other while still stay compliant with? And then so we create holes, and then we create needs to connect. So for example, if an HR system needs to connect to...
Sorry, so question is not about connecting though. We want to keep that isolated, but on the same platform.
You want to keep...
yeah, like multi-tenant options that we have, right?
Yeah.
So suppose, because we have like MCP server is single, right? And then you create those tools. Those tools are talking to various database. Now from the consumer side, they can access any tools which is available. How do we isolate the tools which is very specific to HR, that only the consumer from the HR side can access it?
So I've seen a couple of patterns. One is identity. It's the same tool, but then you may have access to that tool that I don't. So if I go and try to invoke that tool, it will return error because I don't have access to the same tool. I don't have the same privilege. That's one way I've seen it implemented.
Yeah, the idea should not be that for every tenant, you create a new set of infrastructure.
Yeah.
That is cost prohibitive. One must, we have the Bedrock itself is a single interaction. So one interaction is done, then the next interaction is supposed to be completely tenant isolated. That's baked into the product itself. But the idea is that your tools and systems are controlled by identity rather than creating separate infrastructure. That is not the right model. particularly for large organizations. It's just not possible to have those type of
Yeah,
multi-tenant
exactly. Yeah, that's why I was thinking that do we have any inbuilt multi-tenant pattern within the Bedrock solution?
No. So the way it is works is it's inherently based on each API call.
Okay.
So every API call that makes Bedrock itself is a single call from a single tenant.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you shared resource. It's not a single resource across the entire organization.
Correct. The execution is isolated at a hardware level. We call it micro VMs. So when you are interacting, your agent is running with your session, it runs in an isolated session from a different individual. That adds additional layer of security, but you'll notice that we are moving you away from duplicating system to maintain multi-tenancy. We are encouraging you to use identity-based access. It's more efficient, easy to control as well.
Got it. Yeah. Thanks.
Good question.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just a couple questions on scaling. You mentioned scaling up to thousands, even millions. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what the techniques would be to scale to something like that degree?
Yeah. So the traditional scaling techniques that we've always used with application still applies. How many users are initiating interaction with the application? And based on that, we scale horizontally. We add more resources for you. And then so that could be based on how many users we see coming into the queue. It could also be time-based, where I know around this time of the year, day, month, I see a spike, and therefore I'll scale up. Automatically, you just program it, it scales up and then down. So all the same scaling techniques that you may find using AWS services exist within Agent Core as well.
I'll just share one point though, that if you think about user session would translate to a server, and a server is instantiated and you're using that server. In an agent, there is no concept of user session. It's called workload. For every invocation, there has to be a micro VM somewhere that is sitting around and waiting for an agent to come up. So the dynamics of sessions to servers is completely gone when it comes to agents. You can have a few agents with a few micro VMs, or you can have a few agents with millions of micro VMs, all within the same infrastructure. It's all dependent upon the runtime scaling that you see in the systems itself.
Yeah, so maybe to adjust the question a little bit, less about scaling around runtimes and execution, more about scaling of creation of that many agents. Is that something, agents creating agents to get to that kind of
Yes, it's
scale?
agents creating agents. So usually, like the pattern is a swarm pattern or a supervisor pattern, where agents exist as sort of waiting for the workload. But the moment a sort of invocation takes place, the supervisor agent comes and says, who are the agents who can do my job? And that information is available through something called as a skills registry. And that skills registry is emanated, and you have all these agents that can say, I can do the work, I can do the work, I can do the work. And they interact with the supervisor and say, OK, let me take care of it. There are multiple patterns like that, supervisor patterns, swarm patterns. Yeah. Probably there are other patterns too, I'm not sure. Yeah. But definitely there are lots of patterns that talk about how to swarm and create multiple agents. But it is agent on basis of agent. User does not create the agent. Agent is automatically created.
Gotcha, thanks.
Yeah, and think of agent, you don't want to think of it as creating an agent. It's just an instance of an agent that you've defined. And then so you instantiate that agent for a task, and then once it's no longer needed, it's gone.
You had a question there?
The microphone.
So this is, hi, I'm Neha. So this is more of a broader question, like from a solution architecture point of view. Do you have some metrics of how you decide whether this use case actually needs an agentic architecture or not? Like, is it worth going to production, or like, do you stop at POC?
Very, very good question. And I think that is something that we must be very clear about from the beginning. I was talking to a customer who wanted to ensure that they are able to automate away 6 weeks of work into a few days. So unless you have that business outcome very clearly defined, don't even try this. You have to have like a clear opportunity creation and reduction of compression of time for an activity to be able to like at least start the process of exploring a POC. Most of the time, the POCs to production problem fails is because the business metrics or the return of investment has not been clearly identified. I don't know if you wanted to add something.
Yeah, it's about thinking backward, right? You think, what is the problem, and then how can I solve it? And you start from there, because then you know that I'm trying to solve X problem, and then you know how it's going to benefit your organization. When you decide whether to use an agent, a tool, there are multiple different patterns. You may decide to upgrade a tool to an agent based on some patterns, and it's still up for debate, really. But yeah, some people prefer one agent, multiple tools. Some people prefer a supervising agent with different tools, different agents, sub-agents.
Yeah, the reality of the business impact does not change. I mean, you
Yeah.
can have all these implementation techniques.
Yep.
There are probably more implementation techniques than people around here, but seriously, you have to know the business metrics. That's the end of the day, the most important thing.
Thank you.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Excellent session.